Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you guys about how I, as a Protestant Christian, have some reservations about whether to celebrate Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday.
How does Christianity intersect with the world that I live in, and how can I learn to follow Jesus in an everyday kind of way?
I like sharing my experiences here on this channel because I figure that a lot of other people can relate to my experience. I know that I'm not the only Protestant Christian out there. You might not be a Protestant Christian. You might be more of a Roman Catholic or Orthodox, or maybe you're like, I don't have a denomination. Whatever the case is for you, I'm going to share my perspective as a Protestant, and I'll explain a little bit more about that if you're like, what is that? But also I'm going to, share about other, denominations as far as what I have learned so far about them and what the history is, and, my limited information about their practices and so on. So around this time of the year, we are celebrating Easter here in America, and we always have this thing where if you are a Christian, you never know if your family members or your friends or your church, what their personal views are about Easter, for example. Or we get the same thing around the time of Christmas. We get the same kinds of things like around Halloween and things like that. There are different views, and we all make our own decisions. We all try to live in obedience to God as best as our conscience is convicting us, or as far as we understand the Bible and so forth. I know for me as a Christian, I've always been a Protestant, and I've gone to churches where Protestants are big on celebrating, for example, specifically here in this video, we're big on celebrating Easter. Just kind of trying to take it a little light here, but we joke around saying that it's the Super Bowl of Christians, Easter. That's like when the church, the worship leaders, the pastors, this is when everyone knows that people are going to show up to church because it's like a holiday, and families like to go to church together. And this is like the chance that you get as a church to reach to a lot of people that are not Christians, and maybe they'll come to your church. And what else? So usually the worship team goes all out. They might have a choir or whatever. They might have a special program, special services on Friday. I know as a kid we used to have, I think it was Assemblies of God, the denomination where I grew up in. We used to have plays. The church would spend months practicing for these special events, and it was kind of nice to live next to our church at the time as a kid and just see all the effort that went into this. I know they would stay late on just different days, and they would be rehearsing this, and I remember they used to put different lighting colors, and it was so exciting as a kid to be able to see whoa, everything that goes into a play, and costumes, and so sometimes I would participate in them, and there were rehearsals, and there would be just acting out the story of Easter. It would be a nice way to be aware about what Jesus did around that time of the year. There would be special songs that go in about what we're focusing on, and not to mention it's such a big deal because it is the foundation of what Christians believe. If we didn't have this message, there would be nothing to believe in. If we didn't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and he paid the price for our sins on the cross, and not just that, but his resurrection, defeating death, giving us this hope for this eternal life for us, and just seeing, wow, everything he says we can trust because he rose from the dead. He's unlike any other religious leader out there, because, you know, you've heard this saying probably, that we know where most of the religious figures have been buried, but nobody has a location, bones, evidence of Jesus' body. So there's this truth about Christianity rooted in the resurrection of Jesus, as I believe it was Paul who said that in the New Testament, that if the resurrection is not true, then we are like pitiful people, because there's like nothing to support our beliefs. So yeah, I remember at other churches also we would do the play. It has been my recent experience these last years where I've gotten kind of like the Baptist experience. It was very culture shock for me, not to say anything negative or anything, but it's very just different from what my experiences have been. Where one time I went into a church service, and we sat there while the leaders were reading and the worship team was singing, but we were more of just watching and listening. And so there's that also. And I'm sure there are other traditions out there, maybe from different denominations, where the mass or whatever those traditions are like for them. But like I said, I'm just speaking from my experience as a Protestant. So what's the difference? Why am I a Protestant? It comes from my understanding that Protestant Christians are rooted in the Protestant Reformation, which was led by Martin Luther. And obviously I'm going to say things not very detailed, and so it's just very general information here that I'm sharing. So I'll probably not word it right, and there's probably definitely more that I need to research and learn more about, but here's what I know so far, what I think I know. We started with Judaism, and I'm going to share this. I'm going to share my version, my Protestant Christian version of the history of Good Friday and Resurrection Day, and the good and the bad, and how I reconcile that as a Christian here today. So yeah, my Christianity begins in Judaism. You know, we learn in the Old Testament, you have the world. And at the place where we pick up is obviously God had a plan from the beginning. And so there's this genealogy that's happening, and ultimately, you know, starting from Adam and ultimately going down to Abraham. Abraham, God chose him. His father, where he was from, they worshiped false gods, but Abraham was different. God chose Abraham, and he told him, leave your father's household, and I'm going to make you a people. You're going to be a very numerous people. And God had a plan, and he miraculously brought about this chosen people. And his plan for this chosen people included us, not Jews, Gentiles. So it's not something for us to feel bad about or jealous about as Christian Gentiles. We were in the plan all along, but God had to choose a special people, and it was a hard job. And yeah, I'm not sure a lot of different peoples would have wanted to volunteer for it, but thankfully Israel thrived through good and bad times, and ultimately the genealogy continued until Jesus was born from Mary. And God used Joseph to, continue to bring about this plan, not through the birth of Jesus, but you could follow the Jesus genealogy through Joseph, even though he wasn't the birth father. When Jesus was in his ministry, he taught, and one of the things that separates Christians today is the belief that when Jesus was talking to Peter, he said, and upon this rock I will build my church. So Catholics believe that Jesus was saying, I'm going to make Peter the leader, so the first pope. My pastor taught us that actually what Jesus was saying, yeah, he was calling Peter, he changed his name from Simon to Peter, meaning rock. I forget exactly what it means, but what Jesus was saying, and upon this rock, referring to himself, I will build my church. Remember, he referenced himself as the cornerstone. So I think that's the difference, where Protestants don't accept that Peter was the first pope. And so there's that division right away from the beginning. The history, very complicated, but as far as I've been able to understand, there was Judaism, and then Jesus is here, and he's like, I am the fulfillment. So technically Judaism was Christianity. But because of the rejection of Jesus by some Jews did believe in Jesus, which were known as, there's a word for it, but that's, I think, the origins of why we call ourselves Christians. And so from there, we're starting to get the religion of Christianity. But technically, it was Judaism was and is the foundation of Christianity. Because of the rejection, though, now there's this like a schism, I guess, a division of, okay, so we need to be able to differentiate the Jews that continue to practice Judaism but reject Jesus, or haven't come to know about Jesus. We're still calling it Judaism. They don't make the connections as, for example, Messianic Jews that believe in Jesus Christ. Messianic Jews make the connections of, well, this is through Jesus, what his teachings, we can understand what the Old Testament and what the point of all these festivals was. But so you have the Jews that don't believe, and so they have completely different understandings of what their festivals are about, their purpose and all of that, awaiting a Messiah and all of that. So then the disciples were called to spread the gospel, these good news about Jesus Christ's resurrection and everything he taught about himself. They focused their ministry was to the Jews, but God called Paul and his helpers to go spread the same good news to the Gentiles. I believe in the New Testament there's a warning saying, hey, you guys don't split up, because Christianity started here with the Jews. So it's not like Gentiles you could do without, the Jews. You don't separate, pretty much, even though the requirements were different for Gentiles. It's like you can just follow Jesus with these few guidelines that they gave in the New Testament about stay away from these things. The problem ended up being that, for example, the good thing is that we have the manuscripts, we have the teaching itself. But what ended up happening is that the disciples of the disciples, and maybe even the next generation, the disciples of them, somewhere along the way, the message started to get different, as far as there were some books that are considered inspired, which Protestant Christians believe. There are 66 books. And then the other Christians, like Catholics, they have more books. Those other books, I'm guessing, are supportive of their views of how their customs, their traditions, and so forth. I haven't looked into it. I do want to one day. We don't accept those books as divinely revealed by God, although there are some good things that we can get from them. Maybe there are good lessons. Maybe they definitely we could use them as like for historical purposes and things like that. But the messages taught there are not compatible with what we believe the rest of the Bible teaches about God and so forth. There's that difference as well. And my guess is that along the way, these differing teachings, they evolved into what we could see historically led to the Protestant Reformation, led by Martin Luther, where we get to the point where there were a lot of different practices and teachings that Martin Luther's like, wait a minute, we need to return to just what the Bible teaches. What's going on about like that Christians have to pay like indulgences or pay money in order for their sins to be forgiven or something like that. There were these practices that it's even like praying to saints and things like that. I have to research more the Protestant Reformation, but as far as I am aware, Protestants are taught only to pray to the Father through the Son Jesus Christ, with the help of the Holy Spirit. And those are our roots that Martin Luther, there was discussion already happening, and Martin Luther was the one that like wrote it down and nailed his thesis, and so the Reformation began. As a Protestant, I'm grateful for the Catholic Church because, there was a lot of politics happening, and a lot of things could have happened regionally with different religions, and I'm glad that, although maybe not the right way to go about it, but there was this intention of, hey, let's not back down with our beliefs of Jesus Christ. And so I'm grateful for that as a Protestant to the Catholic Church, but still I'm more committed. My commitment to what the Bible actually teaches is greater than my appreciation to a church, a tradition, or whatever you would call it. Along the way, even during the time of the Protestant Reformation, there was this anti-Semitism that emerged. For whatever reason, my guess would be that it had to do with politics, and bumping of heads, and I don't know, wars maybe even, I don't know. So whatever the reason was, obviously as a spiritual component, I can see that it would be the influence, the agenda of Satan, to just continue to spread hatred for the Jews and attempt to eradicate them, because Satan doesn't want God's purposes to thrive. If you notice my voice, I'm sick. I'm getting over a cold. Sorry, I apologize for it, but I did want to share this video. So, trying to wrap it up quickly right now. There became this even greater split due to anti-Semitism, and somewhere along the way, I think it was the Catholic Church, I don't know the details, there was this decision made where it's like, we need to like separate from our Jewish roots, and we just need to be our own form of Christianity. And I'm not here to defend Jews. I don't know what was going on. I don't know the dynamics. There are good and bad guys of all kinds, just because one person does something, I'm not going to believe that all people that are like them are like that. So whatever the case was, there was the separation of Good Friday and Easter, and so now we're not observing Passover, which is what we learn about, and it feels foreign to us as Christians. I think because of our approach as Christians, that we did separate ourselves. We feel like we don't really have to know about the Jewish traditions, and so like if you go to Bible college because you want to learn more about the Bible, that's what they teach you. They teach you the Jewish origin so you can better understand the Bible. So it was a bad idea in my opinion, but so the Jews have their own calendar, and so it's interesting to me to have learned that it's possible to celebrate Easter, Good Friday with the Jewish calendar, following the Passover events and so forth. But we have our own traditions now, and we have our own calendar, our own dates of when we celebrate this. Even with Martin Luther, it seems that he became very anti-Semitic the older and the sicker he got. And he wanted to reach the Jews. He wanted to evangelize to them. He wanted them to come and become believers in Jesus Christ. It seems that he didn't get the results he wanted, and so he became very, very hateful towards the Jews. That's the shameful part of being known as Protestant Christians, in my opinion, because of that terrible failure of Martin Luther, what is known as the leader of this But, you take the good and you reject the bad and you condemn the bad so that we can get a better reputation as Protestant Christians, right? I've heard that there are a lot of Jewish people that are taught, hey, the Christians hate you. Look what happened historically. Look what they did to the Jews, and look at what they said about Jews. And so apparently something that Martin Luther wrote was so bad, so hateful. He encouraged bad things to be done to the Jews, their businesses, their synagogues, to them, and just really, really terrible things about them, as like if they're lazy, like if they have to be forced to do things to earn money or whatever. This ended up being motivation for the Nazis later on, years later, and it inspired the beginning of, I guess, the Holocaust, in which they went into, I think it was the night of the broken glass or something like that, and they went and they destroyed like Jewish places, and one person was recorded saying that, look how beautiful, there's still smoke on Martin Luther's I think it was his birthday. So anyway, that's the bad part of this story. But sticking to the good part, the message of Easter, the message of Good Friday, that's pure, that's untainted, and that's what we should focus on. I had a conversation with my kids. I told them, as long as we in our hearts are aware of our Jewish connection, our roots in Christianity, as long as we're aware of the Passover and the message and what these things Jesus taught us mean, as long as we don't have hatred for Jewish people, we don't celebrate on these days in our heart is pure, and we're not trying to separate from our Jewish believers, then God sees our heart, and it's okay, and we focus on the message. And ultimately, the more Christian holidays that we can get on a map, I believe, even if some people believe that they are tainted with pagan roots and things like that, even if that was the case, it's still good that we have Christian holidays on our map, because it keeps an opportunity for more people to believe in Jesus Christ, to hear about the message. It provides a good opener for us to like have conversations with friends, family, non-believers, and also it unites us it helps us all to be united on a weekend where we're all focusing and grateful for what Jesus Christ did for us. It might be even nicer to be united wholly with our Jewish family on the days that Jesus was like historically. It's nice to be able to follow him, like, but we could celebrate both if it really is important to us. We could celebrate following the Jewish calendar, and we could celebrate following these other days, which most of Christians don't really understand the history and aren't celebrating deliberately to be apart from our Jewish foundation. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I'm planning on reading about the crucifixion and the resurrection later on in the evening of these days. We're gathering as a family on Sunday, and so whatever your traditions are, just do it with the right heart, and happy Easter, happy Resurrection Day, happy Good Friday to you guys. Bye.
Sign up for my monthly newsletter at susanmorales.org, and if you would like to support what I do, become a member of this channel or a patron, and as a thank you, I share extra videos there. You can find the links in the description section below.